You're listening to the Future Tech Health Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Until I reached age 40, I never realized the obvious, that we all have medical issues, or we at least have a family member or close relation that has, or will have them in the future. Medicine and biological systems are the final frontier. Until we've conquered death, figured out how life began, cured cancer, and understood our purpose in the universe, there's a heck of a lot to talk about when it comes to our health. Future Tech Health means I'll be covering futuristic topics that are actually already in clinical trials, or even starting to appear on shelves or by prescription, or available for your own use. We dive deep into stem cells, CRISPR-Cas9, the science of sleep, epigenetics, medical testing, cancer, ketogenic diets, stem cells, aging, regenerative medicine, and more. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a serious medical problem. Remember, however, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoy the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and share it with friends. Thank you. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech and Future Tech Health Podcast. I have Dr. Daniel Pompa, PSCD. We're going to talk about true cellular detox and healing in a massive group fasting event as well. The website is drpompa.com, drpompa.com. So Daniel, thanks for coming. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. I just got off my mountain bike. When I do that, I'm always doing well.
I'm sure, yeah. So tell me about what's your health journey been like? Because usually people in the health field have, unfortunately, some kind of crisis in the past they'd overcome.
Yeah, well, that was me. It was all the way back 1999, 2000, especially to probably about 2005. I became very ill, unexplainable illness. Started with fatigue. I was cycling at the time, racing bikes, so I thought I was just overtraining, but took more time off, rested more, and things were getting worse, not better. And it went beyond fatigue. I mean, to the point of just bizarre symptoms that I never had. Debilitating anxiety, insomnia, panic attacks. Couldn't get to sleep, wake up in the night, couldn't get back to sleep, feeling of dread, sound sensitive beyond belief. Basically became intolerant and allergic to all these different foods, never happened before. So all these gut issues and hormone dysfunction. I mean, I for years addressed my adrenals, my thyroid, because it was malfunctioning, but I was doing everything I could there, and I wasn't really getting better. Maybe some things, but some things were getting worse. So I knew just intuitively, being a physician, that it was too far downstream. There was something in the pituitary hypothalamus, which is the area in your brain that controls all your endocrine organs, like your thyroid and your adrenals and your hormones. But I just didn't know what was wrong. And I had become good friends with a very bright endocrinologist, really trying to figure out that whole hormonal cascade, if you will. And he said to me, Dan, I think you have mercury poisoning. And I said, well, I thought so too. About a year before that, I found Mad Hatter's disease online, and I had every symptom. And I don't know if you recall what Mad Hatter's disease is, but it was the people making felt hats actually used mercury as part of the process, and they became very sick and known as Mad Hatters. I mean, I literally had all the symptoms. So I got a blood test, and it was negative, unfortunately, because look, if I was getting exposed every day like the people making felt hats, I would have definitely been positive. But he said, it's the wrong test. It would be positive only if you were getting acutely exposed, which I think you're more chronically exposed throughout your life, and I'm like, from what? Anyways, he started questioning me on different things. And, of course I had vaccinations, but nothing like kids today, which would hold some mercury. But he said, do you have any silver fillings removed, or how many you have in? They contain 50% mercury. And actually, right before it all started, I went back and looked at my cycling journal. I had 2 silver fillings removed, which again contained 50% mercury. And it was days after that the fatigue started. I just never associated it. And here I was years later.
After they were removed?
Well, they were removed, but it was removed incorrectly. So those listening, caution. I teach a protocol to do on the front end of that, during that and after, because a lot of people get their fillings removed, but the problem is the mercury vaporizes off those fillings for the life of the filling. I mean, you can go on Google smoking tooth and you'll see that's a 25-year-old filling. And the reason that's important is because many dentists say, those fillings are old now and all the mercury is off-gassed. It's not true. The life of those fillings, that mercury off-gases, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it is basically stored in the brain. In my case, a lot was in the pituitary hypothalamus, where I intuitively knew the problem was. But I just didn't know what was wrong. But in studies show that's where a lot of it goes, right in that control tower for your hormones. And anyways, the bottom line is that for the life of the filling, it's bioaccumulating in the brain. That just, when I got it removed, that just kind of set my bucket overflowing, so to speak. And if you would have asked me, Richard, if I were healthy a week before, the day before, I would have said, oh my gosh, absolutely. No fatigue. I sleep great, and then my bucket spilled over. And unfortunately, people that are getting these neurotoxic exposures like mercury, I mean, whether it is from flu shots, which still contain 25 micrograms of ethyl mercury, which goes right into the brain, from silver fillings from the past or present. There's so many different exposures. Fish today is loaded with mercury and many other sources. And people living in moldy homes, hidden infections. These all are things now I teach to doctors to look for upstream of why someone is not getting well despite a perfect diet or doing all these great things. So I'm blessed now to teach doctors all the protocols that really came from pain to purpose through that story.
So what particular issues do people have that maybe come to you for advice, or what particular issues do you cover? And then what are the reasonings for those problems? Do you look at what happens if people have fillings in their mouth for, X number of years, and then you take them backwards through that and talk to them about getting the fillings taken out the right way, or, what's your focus?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things. When I take on a client myself, my passion and purpose is to train as many doctors as I can in these protocols that, again, most of which was put together getting my own life back. And the irony of even my story is that literally after getting my life back, it wasn't not long after we had a death in the family, and we had to take on two children at 7 years old. They lost their parents tragically, and whole huge story there. But he was on the autism spectrum. And so literally I started applying what got me well to him. And Dylan is 22 years old, works for the company, Revelation Health, and my seminar company. But you would never know it, that he was ever damaged. I always like to say I was my first patient. Dylan was my second. One of my business partners in my seminar business was also my patient who's passionate about this topic. But the bottom line is pain to purpose is everything I've lived out, and the protocols really have come out all of that. And so my passion is teaching doctors these, and I'm teaching doctors from all around the world. However, I do still take on some very sick people virtually from all around the world. So I don't have a brick and mortar practice anymore. But when I do take them on, my goal is to teach them everything they need to do and learn to do it long enough to get their life back. And that is all of my cellular detox. There's a prep phase, there's a body phase, and there's a brain phase. And ultimately it's the brain phase is what's unique, very unique about what I teach, because you have to get it out of the brain if you're going to fix your hormones, whatever it is. But to answer your question, when I take on a case like this where I coach them, and again, it's coaching, right? I'm doing it virtually. It's not treating. My goal is to teach them, and that empowers them. But I look upstream to why they're not getting well. And oftentimes it's hidden heavy metal sources. Lead's another one. Lead is hidden. And the number one source of lead is our moms in utero. And it's released from the bone where it's stored throughout life. So it can be a very hidden cause of illness. And then hidden infections, people that have root canals and these things called cavitations, where you had wisdom teeth removed and heals over. And these infections will drive autoimmune and create sickness 20, 30, 40 years later. And people living in mold. These are neurotoxic sources that most people don't know they have. But if you don't get upstream to the cause, I don't care if you eat the perfect diet. It won't get you well. I don't care what you do, what pills you take, how much you exercise. And, that's the key. That's how I got my life back. That's how my son got his life back. So the key is getting to the cause. That's it.
So what is your protocol? How do people find out about the cellular detox, and what are the steps involved, the initial ones?
Yeah, look, there's different levels. I've trained a lot of doctors in this. You can go to my website at drpompa.com, and there's coaching services there. It kind of walks you through, whether it's one of the doctors or if I would take you on. But those are definitely the cases that are challenged. And then I also have something that doctors have put in their offices called True Cellular Detox, which is more of a plug and play detox that basically is a portal that the person would have access to educate them through this process. And it's more plug and play. It's someone is not as sick and challenged as, you need a coach if you are, no doubt about it, whether it's me or one of the doctors I train. But the True Cellular Detox was more of like, there's a prep phase, here's the pills. There's a body phase, here's the pills, and here's the brain phase. And it's a 90-day program. And again, you can see that on my website. But if you have a severe condition, if you're challenged or been challenged for a long time, you need a coach. I always say if I got sick again, I would hire one of the doctors I coach, just because you can't think through your own stuff. So, detox, when it's done right, must be at the cell. And this is what I mean by this, Richard, meaning you go now, detox is very in vogue because people realize that their hormones are disrupted because of toxins, or even can't lose weight. Weight loss resistance, the number one cause is toxins. Even diabetes, 35% is toxin related. The reason is because the toxins accumulate in and around your cells. This is where the hormone receptors are that make you feel normal and good, or even be able to lose weight and use fat as energy. All that's a cellular issue. So when the toxins make their way in and around the cell, they drive cellular inflammation. They blunt the hormone receptor. So you're never going to fix your hormone condition by taking hormones, bioidentical hormones. And there's a time and a place for that. But the world's doing that right now, and they're not getting better because the receptors to the hormones, toxins are affecting those. And therefore, it doesn't matter if you take more hormones. It's like shouting at your kids. You can shout louder and louder. They hear you less and less. So it's like the hormones. You can take more, but your cells hear you less unless you get to what's driving the inflammation, blunting these hormone receptors. And that's the toxin. So real detox, you have to get to the cell. So my point is, you go into a health food store now, detox is very in vogue. There's shelves now, whole sections of detox, but most of those detox programs, or the 10-day cleanse, 30-day cleanse, whatever they are, they're poopers, meaning they make you go to the bathroom, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not how I got my life back or thousands of others. You really have to get up to the cell where the problem really is. And cells are designed to get rid of toxins. The problem is when we get exposed to these nasty neurotoxins, it shuts down all of the detox pathways in the cell. So really, you have to restore that. Otherwise, you're never going to get your life back. You're not going to get your hormones hearing, or your cells hearing your hormones. So step one is we upregulate cellular function. That's real detox. Number two is you have to open up downstream detox pathways like the liver, the kidneys, the gut, the lymph. I mean, that's very important. And a lot of people fail to do that. So you have to upregulate the cell to detox. You have to open up the downstream pathways. And this is a big one. With real detox, you have to use real binders. A lot of people are using chlorella and cilantro, and those are weak binders. We use a binder in and around the cell that when it grabs on to these nasty neurotoxins, it doesn't let go, like a biotoxin from mold or a heavy metal. And it acts as a vehicle from the cell and makes sure that the toxin goes all the way out of the body. The problem is people take these weak binders and chelators and it redistributes. It's like poking a bee's nest. You're just going to redistribute toxins throughout the body, most of which end up crossing the blood-brain barrier, making you worse. So it's dangerous. But you need to use real binders to escort these toxins from the cell all the way out of the body. Then we use another clever binder in the gut. This process is kind of what I developed over the last 20 years. This sits in the gut, doesn't leave the gut. It acts like a catcher's mitt, because one of the things that happens is even from your liver through the bile complex, that's what you use to digest fat, that it carries toxins right into the gut. When you use this bile from your liver to break down fat, it's released from the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and then it's dumped in the gut to break down fat for digestion. But the problem is it carries all of these toxins in it. Here's the bigger issue. You reabsorb the bile back to the liver to use it again. So what does it bring with it? It brings toxins right back around. It's called autointoxication. So we use a binder in the gut that has 4 different types of binders. So you're able to bind all these different types of toxins so you don't reabsorb it. It breaks that cycle that people, when they're detoxing, they're just cycling the toxins around and around. So number one, you have to upregulate cell detox and cell function. You have to open up downstream detox pathways, and you have to use real binders. That, just as broad as I could make it, is what real detox is. And that's what's getting thousands of lives back. And that's why I'm passionate at teaching it.
So what does the protocol look like? Is it stuff to drink or eat, or, literally how does it work?
Most of it's pills. And it's taken, matter of fact, I'm doing a detox cycle right now. I've got my life back. I'm 54 years old and healthier now than when I was in my 30s. But I still periodically do a brain phase where, I'm just keeping things moving out. And that's how I age slower, and how my brain works as good as it does. So the one product I'm taking, it's called Detox. That's the binder that we use in and around the cell. It's actually a liquid, and that way it can be used very easily with any type of protocol. But there's also some pills that we take that help upregulate the cell function, and then the binder in the gut that I talked about. So most of it's pills, and it's pretty easy to take, really.
Well, how did you develop this? How did you find good binder versus bad? How did you figure out this whole protocol?
Yeah, good question. I mean, years of searching this out. When you go online and you look up detox, there's so much bad information, probably more than any health topic. Detoxes, there's just a lot of snake oil out there. There's a lot of misunderstanding. So finding a real binder, I realized was very important early on. And, when you look at things like cilantro, chlorella, these things are used, or some of these herbal binders, in our space a lot. But when you talk about those things to scientists, they'll tell you, well, it's a weak binder, here's why. And if you look at it, there's something called a sulfahedral group, which is sulfur and hydrogen. A lot of those binders only have one of these binding areas. And so they don't hold on very well, that's just one example. But the bottom line is that you have to talk to scientists, certain things just get accepted into our space of natural medicine, if you will. And one of which is like chlorella. Chlorella binds things in a petri dish very well, but when you take it orally, your microbiome, your gut bacteria, break it down, change it. And it's not a great detox agent, and yet it's advertised as the metal magnet, and it's this and that. And I could say that for many of these products. So we really went more to scientists to find out what are real binders. And that was my area of research for many years. And I was working with many people much smarter than me, and some very bright scientists on this process. And over the years, we've really discovered and put together better products, based on these concepts of real binders and using real binders. So it's a growing science. But even when you use a real binder, then it has to be used correctly. Now, let me give you an example. So, there's a binder called DMSA. There's one called DMPS. So these are real binders that work, and they're known and studied. The problem is people will take, say, DMSA once or twice, even 3 times a day, when it has to be taken every 4 hours within its half-life. Otherwise, you create redistribution. So you have to take these things right. DMPS has to be taken every 8 hours, so 3 times a day. Some people just take it once a day. And when you detox, you have to cycle. You don't stay on detox. You have to stay on maybe 3 days on, 4 days off, 7 on, 7 off, maybe 4 on, 10 off. That's different for everybody. Some people do better with longer cycles. Some people do shorter cycles. It's one of the things I teach and even when I take a client on or a person, I teach them how to know what's better for them, what binders are better for them, what chelators are better for them, what support they need. That's all a little different for everybody, Richard. So that's what I said. If your challenge is that you need a coach, because you can't just plug and play into one thing. It's not so simple that people think. And that's what makes it real. You don't take the 30-day cleanse and, I've got mercury out of my brain. It took me 4 years to get mercury out of my brain. So if you don't learn the process, or you have a coach to teach you that process, you'll go broke going to a doctor's office and being hooked up to IVs. It just doesn't work like that. It's not how I got my life back.
It doesn't work well, or it doesn't work at all, or how important is it to stick to the schedule of on-off and the amounts?
The problem with going and getting an IV, which typically they're using real chelators like DMPS as an example, or EDTA. Those are real chelators. They work. But the problem is you go and you get one IV. The half-life of DMPS is very short in the body. And that's why you have to take it 3 times a day and for at least 3 days before you stop it. So you minimize the redistribution. So when you go in and get the IV done, you're getting one huge dose. You go home, the DMPS is out of your body in about 12 hours, most of it, and your body's still releasing mercury. And what happens is it redistributes. Even the next day, it's still releasing mercury, and the binder, the chelator, is gone. So that's why you have to stay on it for at least 3 days. So when you do stop, you minimize what redistributes around your body. But also, DMPS has to be taken every 8 hours underneath its half-life. So you can't, I guess you could do an IV every 8 hours, but that would be very costly, number one. Number two, it would be very difficult. So that's why taking oral agents is much easier and, obviously way more affordable, but it's frankly it's safer and it works better. So you have to take these real binders like Cyto Detox. This is one that you can take 2 to 3 times a day because it has about a 12-hour half-life. So you could take it twice if you just take it every 12 hours. But I always tell people, take it 3 times. That way you kind of keep it in your system to prevent any redistribution. So I took a dose this morning, and I just took a dose about 5 minutes ago, and I'll take one before bed. But I'm doing that. I'm taking Bind, that product that sits in the gut. I do that before bed. And I'm taking some other cellular upregulators to get my cell moving the toxins out. So the Cyto Detox brings it out of the body. So, again, it's that process is a little different for everybody, but that's just kind of a broad example of what I'm doing.
So what kind of examples have you had of people that you've worked with, some interesting stories or dramatic stories that really stand out to you? What happened to the person before and after?
Well, look, you can go to my my podcast, which is called Cellular Healing TV, and you get there by just going to my website at drpompa.com. And there's many, many, many people who give amazing testimony there. The last one that was just in was a gal named Tamara. I think it was probably posted maybe 3 or 4 episodes ago. Just as an example, she had severe autoimmune, severe gut issues. Hashimoto's one of the autoimmunes that she had. She had done everything. Perfect diet already. No doubt was one of those gals who had the ability and the discipline to do everything, but she wasn't well. So what did I do that was so special? Well, I just got to the causes. She had mercury in her brain. She had a cavitation that I spoke a little bit about. She had one of these jaw infections that were killing her. And another, well, I'll leave the rest of that as a surprise, but there was another big hidden source. You'll have to watch the episode. The idea here that I want you to understand is if you don't get upstream to the actual cause of what's disrupting your hormones or what's driving your thyroid or your autoimmune, you're not going to get well. And again, I coached her to these processes in detox. And, she's got her life back in a couple of years, but she'll continue that process for some years, even yet. But anyways, there's that. Yeah, there's several other episodes there where you can hear these actual real stories, how people got their life back. A gentleman who works for me now, his name is Cameron, and brilliant kid, absolutely brilliant. He was so sick that he literally became allergic to every food, and then he became allergic to water. There was one water he was able to drink, and then all of a sudden his body started reacting to that. So literally they brought him to the hospital, and because they were going to try to get an IV in him, his body was reacting anaphylactically to everything, to where they literally sent him home to die. They couldn't get water or food in him. He ended up going without water or food 12 days. So everyone was trying to push food in him, water him, you're going to die. And one of the things I said, Cam, just listen to your body. Anyways, he ended up going without food or water for 12 days. By the way, I teach fasting. It's one of the strategies that I teach. Matter of fact, my new book will be out here any week. It's called Beyond Fasting. And Cam was forced into a fast because he couldn't do it. His body was not accepting anything. But it was the tipping point for him that got him well. I said, start eating when you get hungry, and your body will tell you intuitively. And that's what he did. And anyways, after that, then we were able to start some of the detox. Anyways, his story is told twice actually on Cell TV, but there's so many. Richard, I could go through a lot of different stories.
Oh, that's great. So what's the best way for people to find out more and to get in touch and, get started on the program like this if they need the help?
Yeah, no, just go to drpompa.com, drpompa.com, and coaching services there. There's thousands of articles. My podcast is Cellular Healing TV. Listen to all the back podcasts. I mean, there's a lot there. So enjoy it and educate yourself. That's the key.
All right. That's great. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Richard. Thank you for having me.
You're listening to the Future Tech Health Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Until I reached age 40, I never realized the obvious, that we all have medical issues, or we at least have a family member or close relation that has, or will have them in the future. Medicine and biological systems are the final frontier. Until we've conquered death, figured out how life began, cured cancer, and understood our purpose in the universe, there's a heck of a lot to talk about when it comes to our health. Future Tech Health means I'll be covering futuristic topics that are actually already in clinical trials, or even starting to appear on shelves or by prescription, or available for your own use. We dive deep into stem cells, CRISPR-Cas9, the science of sleep, epigenetics, medical testing, cancer, ketogenic diets, stem cells, aging, regenerative medicine, and more. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a serious medical problem. Remember, however, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and share it with friends. Thank you.